So it's all to play for still.
I think so. Do you want to bet against us?
Hello, Aston Villa fans, and welcome to For the Love of Paul McGrath podcast. And I hope that woke you up a small bit. The Danny Ings derby at the weekend is what we're going to call it, because I'm hearing everybody tell me that Danny Ings is going to score 17 goals against Aston Villa at the weekend, and that we're still stupid for letting him go. Now, look, who cares? I couldn't give two shits about Danny Ings. I'm just coming on hot and heavy on this. Danny Ings can play for West Ham all he likes. We've got Ollie Watkins, and he may very well score against us at the weekend. I couldn't give a horse's hoot if he does or not at the weekend. But anyway, that's beside
I'll remind you of that about 4 o'clock on Sunday.
That's fine, Paddy, because what I can do is I can separate myself from whether Danny Ings scores and we win 2-1 as well. Doesn't really bother me.
That's fine. That's absolutely fine.
Yeah, I know. Anyway, we just said we'd start this one hot and heavy. We'd start this one hot and heavy today. But we do have West Ham at the weekend, and West Ham are down a couple of players. We're down a couple of players as well. And it's going to be an interesting game because I've been running a couple of numbers in West Ham, Paddy. They're in a very false position, not because of how they've played this season. They haven't played very well this season, but they're in a false position because they've got very, very good players. All things serious, all things being serious, they've got some really good players. Yet they're only 1 point ahead of the drop zone, and I can't figure it out why, Paddy. Well, I can. They haven't scored enough goals to beat teams, but you know, when we get into the weeds in it, like what has changed from last season to this season with West Ham, I can't quite put my finger on it.
Well, I genuinely think there's something not right there, and there's something a little bit rotten. There's a few players not firing. You got the likes of Declan. Is Declan Rice the club captain?
Declan Rice is club captain. Yes, yeah.
And he more or less come out and said he would go to Chelsea, which is absolutely. If one of the Villa players did that, I would go absolutely spare. I was going to curse there. Are we through the threshold for what you told me today?
I already cursed already. For those of you who are wondering why we're asking that, we may have gotten an email today from YouTube with something about swear words at the start of our podcast, and there was me. Anyway.
I'm glad you beat me to it. Well, you didn't beat you. You were the only one because I didn't at all. But anyway, there you go.
We were saying it's like he came out and then Declan Rice coming out and saying what he said.
Yeah, I just think it just smacks that there's something rotten in there at the moment. I don't know what it is, what's causing it. There's players not firing. Antonio's not firing. I know he's injured at the moment, but
he's back
I
now,
think when you. I don't think he is. No, I think he's still out this weekend. But he's with players like him not firing, you're in big trouble. Because like what you see with Everton, you can have all the good players you want around you, but if you can't score goals, or you haven't got someone there that scores goals, then you're in trouble. Which is the reason why they signed Danny Ings, and he scored a couple of goals. He's been injured, of course, in some of the time. But he'll be fit. He'll be fit for the weekend, and will probably get a start, you would imagine. But yeah, it's hard to put the finger on it. Moyes looks a little bit dejected when he's talking. Is trying to be as positive as he can, but it's just he's kind of slumped when he's talking. It's not like his usual energetic self, or he's not even his bitter self when they lose. That he's not even blaming anyone or giving out, which I found very strange in his interviews. But sure, Aston Villa will rock up. We haven't had the best of times in that stadium, although we did get the draw we needed to stay up in Project Restart. That's probably our best result that I can remember against West Ham since our promotion back to the Premier League. I honestly can't remember us doing pretty well against West Ham. I could be wrong now. There's probably a home fixture in there somewhere that I'm missing. But yeah, that's probably the best of what I can remember since we came back up.
That day, when we stayed up, I've got such bittersweet memories of that day because it was the day after my sister's 30th. I mentioned it in the podcast before,
Yeah.
and I think every single person that came to that was absolutely dying the next day. I sat there watching that game with a bag of peas in my head. My head was pounding that much. And that, let's just say, when Jack Grealish's goal went in, everything was rosy. And then when the equaliser came, the head came right back. So it was, it was one that I watched through my fingers because I couldn't have dealt with Aston Villa going down. the situation I was in, I couldn't have dealt with Aston Villa going down. So I'm glad that they didn't, obviously. For obvious reasons, I'm glad that they didn't. But getting back to this game, you mentioned that West Ham's shyness in front of goals. Let's hope that does continue because West Ham have failed to score in 11 games this season. They've scored over 1 goal 6 times. They've conceded over 1 goal 10 times this season, and they've lost by more than 1 goal 7 times. So, I think the big one there is at the start of the season they weren't scoring goals. They've had a 4-0 win this year, which inflates their highest win. That 4-0 win that they had inflates their numbers. Yeah, inflates their numbers. I think that was the one where Danny Ings got 2 in that game.
It was.
The odds are their top scorer is Jared Bowen, who's got 4 goals. 2 of those came in a game against Everton. Their next highest scorer after him is Scamacca, and then Ben Rama, Mikel Antonio, all with 3 goals. So while they've shared goals around, they still have they've got no focal party, and we hope that that's going to stay the same at the weekend because, as I say, Villa always go into games when they win it. I know I started off hot at the start of it. I was joking for anybody who's going to take me to task on that. We were obviously going to need to marshal Danny Ings if he is playing, and it looks like he will be playing. Mikel Antonio, I'm just looking here. It looks like he's being assessed, but it looks like he's going to play. But the big one for me is Fabianski is out. Now they've got an able deputy in goals in Areola is a very able deputy. Played okay against Manchester United, albeit I think, if I can't remember which shot was it, maybe it might have been Garnacho's shot that he could have saved. I think it was. But he's a player who's a very, very decent player in his own right. He's a good sub goalkeeper to have for them. But Fabianski for me is better. So that's maybe somebody that they're obviously going to miss. And they're not going to have Vladimir Kufal as well. They're right back. Yeah. Looks like he's going to be out as well. And he's somebody that's caused us problems for me, Jack Grealish there. He seemed to have his number. So, him being out as well is going to be a big plus for us.
And I'll probably butcher his name here. Ferrer, is that his name? The centre half?
Yeah.
He'll be a big loss.
Yeah.
Yeah, he'll be a big loss for them as well. So there's a few injuries there, and that will hamper them at the weekend and will play into our hands, I think. It may push them back a little bit deeper. It may determine whether they play Ben Rama with Bowen or just one of them. So they might play somebody extra in midfield because of that. But it'll be an interesting team sheet tantrum to see what way they go with it. But yeah, we will probably see Danny Ings lead the line alongside Bowen, I would imagine. They're not the force they were obviously in previous seasons with those big bruisers in there that did such a great job. The Rice, the Kufal, what's the other lad's name? Central midfielder, Souček. Yeah, it hasn't been firing for them previously, but they've always turned up well against us, albeit they don't have Kufal. So I've a big fear of them at set pieces, mainly because we've always been second best in the air to them. So I think we got to avoid stupid free kicks and giving away set pieces and getting our set pieces right, which will be really important defensively. So you've got 3 training days there, Mr. McPhee. Get it sorted out.
Yeah, and they seem to be playing Thomas Souček more as a kind of a 10 now. They've pushed him up a small bit further forward. They've actually brought Paqueta back to play in that double pivot with Declan Rice. Specifically, when I watched them against Man United in the Cup, that's how they played. And in fairness, they played really well for the first half of that game. And then United came back and obviously won, as we know. But they kind of left Man United off the hook in that game for sure, I thought. And but there was signs that they were beginning to get things right there. And then they go out against Brighton then afterwards, and they lose 4-0 to Brighton. So they're very Jekyll and Hyde at the moment. They're much, much better at home, and that's why their home form is 5 wins, 2 draws, 5 losses. They win 4-0 against Forest, as you mentioned there. That was a home win. They lose 4-0 away against Brighton. So that's where they're Jekyll and Hyde. Now, we're a very good away team. We're a better away team, it seems.
Yeah.
So that's why I'm very interested to see this matchup. And look, as I say, it is going to be an interesting matchup, because I think if Villa can hold them to if Villa can hold them to not scoring, I think we win this game.
Well, we're going to score. Absolutely, we'll get one. But if we could keep a clean sheet here, we win the game. You got a 50-50 chance if you keep a clean sheet. But I totally get what you're saying. I just can't see where they're gonna break us down. I'm hoping that somebody will marshal Danny Ings well enough that we won't have to worry about him. They know him well enough. Bowen always has a good game against us. He's probably the most informed player as a creator and as a workhorse in what they've had in the last 6 months. He's been more or less ever present in there. So other than that, there's not a whole pile more you can say about them until you see what kind of team they put out.
And that's the thing, Paddy, because they've got some really good players. They've got a team full of internationals. Kurt Zuma is a very good centre half. Angelo Agbana is a very good centre half. Look at that, Aguard, very good centre half. Carrera, very good centre half. You've got the likes of Emerson Palmieri. You've got Lucas Paqueta. You've got Lanzini, Fornells, Skamaka, all names that if West Ham put them up for sale in the morning, they're snapped up on the continent.
Absolutely.
And I just cannot I can't see. I think there's no way in world in high heaven that they're going to go down. Not a hope in hell will they go down.
I don't think so either.
I don't think I cannot see them going down. And if they do go down, it'll be a travesty at the level of when they went down with that great team under with the Joe Coles of the world at that stage, because they just have way too much talent. And as I say, they can kick into gear all they want after Sunday. But that 4-0 loss to Brighton will have given a lot of teams hopefully it will have given us a blueprint, and we've got a manager who likes to have a blueprint going into games, so hopefully he can do that and keep things tight. But as you say, big worry is set pieces. Set pieces for sure.
Another mitigating factor in how this game is going to pan out is they have a long trip to Cyprus tomorrow to play Larnaca. So
I forgot all about that. Yes.
Yeah. So they've got that to contend with. Probably not arriving back into the UK until the middle of the night tomorrow night into Friday morning. I know they've got 48 hours to recover, but that is difficult. They might be better off training in Cyprus on Friday and flying back that way, whatever way they decide. But either way, to be on a 5 or 6 hour flight after a bruising game, no doubt, in different temperatures than what they're used to, it'll play havoc with the body. I don't know how early they've gone out there to play or not, but it's definitely something that I'm glad that they have to contend with before they play us at the weekend.
And that's an interesting one. I see somebody who put that in there saying that they don't play well after. John Steele put it in there saying they don't play well after playing in Europe. Well, let's have a little look at that. So they beat Viborg 3-1, then they come back and they lose to Brighton 3 days later. They beat Viborg 3-0. Watch this. They beat Viborg 3-0. And then 3 days later, of course, they come back and beat us 1-0 away from home. Then they played 2 games back to back. Then they played against Bucharest and Siegburg, and then they played Everton. They lost 1-0 to Everton. They played Anderlecht, which they won, and then they came back and they played Fulham. They played Anderlecht again. They came back home and they drew 1-1 to Southampton. Where else did they played Silkeborg, and then they lost 1-0 to United. They played Bucharest. They lost 2-1 to Crystal Palace, and that was their last. That was the last time that they played in the. Yeah, that was back in November. That was the last time that they played in Europe. So, as I say, they've only played 5 days ago. They're now going to be playing again on tomorrow night, and then they're out again on Sunday. So, and as I say, they've got a couple of players with a couple of niggles. Although they are playing Larnaca, they should dispose of Larnaca no problem. You'd be expecting that. But saying that, there's going to be minutes in those legs that Aston Villa won't have, and Aston Villa could do with that, because we're going to shift ahead, I think, to talk a small bit about Aston Villa and the obvious omission from their team at the weekend is going to be Boubacar Kamara. We don't have any word. Well, we're doing this a small bit earlier this week. We know we'd normally do this maybe on a Friday night for a Sunday game, but I just won't be around for the next 2 evenings. So usually we'd have maybe some sort of an injury update, or you'd have one of those that come out from the club, or you'd have Unai Emery would maybe have done his press conference, but we don't know who's going to be in there. Who'd you put in there, Chambers or Dendoncker, Paddy?
For me, if he's fit, it's Dendoncker. I think it's a no-brainer. That's his natural position. I prefer to see him playing in his natural position. He's not on loan. He's our player, so it would be a strange one to bring Chambers into that position. Although, if depending on what's going on with Dendoncker at the moment, we don't know if it's an injury or personal reasons or what it is. But he's still marked as doubtful for the weekend. So whichever one it is going to have a tough job. Luckily, we've got 4 or 5 days training to sort out who that's going to be. And he's probably made his mind up already, and they're probably training on it all week. I'd have no problem with either player. I would prefer Dendoncker just because that's his natural position. He hasn't exactly set the world on fire since he came in, but this is his opportunity to get his finger out and get a run of games where he can stamp his authority on a game and, touring the fans, let's say, is probably the easiest way of putting it, who have been not really too happy with how he's started his Aston Villa career, let's put it.
I think it's been very stop-start, because I think we could probably take a look at it now and say that there's probably a 50-50 chance that nobody knew he was coming. So that there was at least one part of the whether it was either the coaching staff or whether it was either the recruitment staff that didn't know he was coming into the club the day that he came into the club, and it was kind of presented to them. So I'm trying to say panic buy in the nicest way I could possibly say it here. I think that, he's an experienced international, so I think it's probably unfair to say that his game against Brentford was absolutely fantastic. He was really good against Brentford. That gives me a lot of hope. Obviously, his game against Stevenage, we can call that an outlier, and I think it was. Coming off the bench, he seems to be ineffective, and the reason that I think that is because he's a slow, methodical player. So if he's coming into a game that everybody's up to the pace of, you're not going to see him affected that much, because if people are up to the pace of it and he's a slow, methodical player, he maybe needs to play himself into the game a small bit. So by starting him alongside Douglas Luiz, the team plays to that tempo. Or he plays to the team's tempo, shall I say, instead of having coming into a tempo that's dictated for him. I hope that kind of makes sense, I suppose, because I think that we would see a better performance from him if he does start. I think he will be back in the team. I think, like, we've heard two different kind of stories. I read during the week that it was a slight injury that he had, but then obviously after the game, people mentioned that it was personal reasons that he was out for. So for whatever reason he was out, if he does come back into the team, I expect him to be the person, or if he is fit, should I say, I expect him to be the person that plays alongside Douglas Luiz for 2 reasons. You're going to need Chambers on the bench in case the centre half gets injured, because we're not seeing Josh Feeney up there unless we absolutely have to. And you're not going to be able to move any of our fullbacks into that centre half position either. So we've Chambers or bust in that area. I know people say you can move the Dunker back in there, but I think that you start the Dunker at central midfield because he's a natural central midfielder, and you bring Chambers off the bench because he's a natural defender. And instead of inverting the two and putting a triangle in the square slot, I think that's what they'll do. Paddy, do you think that they go basically exactly the same as they did against Crystal Palace, apart from that change? Or do you think maybe we might see a Leon Bailey introduced because it's an away game, maybe attack them like he did against Arsenal, or like he did against, like he has done against teams away from home, and maybe takes out an Emi Buendia or maybe a Jacob Ramsey out of the team? Do you think he does anything drastic like that?
Well, I think it's anybody's guess. The fact that we've come to this last, the only concern really is what we do with that troublesome position where we've lost arguably our best player from the centre of the park, and nothing he would do with Bailey or even like I think McGinn is nailed on to play. Obviously, I hope. Oh, yeah. Hope from his sake that he's not moved back into that position. He may feel he has no choice but to put him back in there as a 6. I don't want to see that because we see a completely different team without McGinn offering what he has offered in the last few weeks in that 8 position. So I would leave McGinn and Ramsey where they are and let him decide what he wanted to do up top himself. For me, it's Buendia all day long. I don't think many people are going to argue we're not getting a tune out of Leon Bailey. So if we're going to get 20 minutes of freakish hell raising from Leon Bailey, let it be the latter 20 minutes and not start for 20 minutes and then go out of the game for half an hour before he gets taken off, which is no good to anybody. So that's my opinion. I'm not saying it's the right one, but that's what I would do. I would leave everything the same. Obviously start Buendia instead of Bailey, and then Donker in for Boubacar Kamara.
I'm just going back through here to see, has anybody asked if we think Duran is going to start?
Somebody said he was going to score his first goal.
That's different to starting. That's different to starting. Because
that was the only time I saw it.
Yeah, I think that's the only time but let's just say that John McGinn did go back into that 6th position, which I'm like you, I don't want him to go back in there. We read a piece from Greg Evans, and if you didn't read it, go read it in The Athletic. If you are that way inclined, give it a read. It talks about how he was played out of position last season. Now, I don't want to blow my own trumpet, but I will. I've in the past done a statistical analysis of John McGinn over his first 3 seasons in the Premier League, how he's played in a different position every single season for his first 3 seasons, and last season was no different. He played in a completely different position, and this season he's back out almost into the position he played when we first came into the Premier League, as in he had control of one side of the field. He needed to worry about one side of the field. When Dean Smith moved him back into the centre and made him that guy who protected that centre circle and had to be sideline to sideline player as opposed to box player, it kind of took that small bit out of him moving laterally, because teams were able to blow past him because he's not very physically stout. And he also got injured when he started playing that position. He got injured against Southampton, wasn't it? And then look, the rest is history from there, I suppose. So I like seeing him out there, and I wouldn't move him into that central position. But if I did move him in there, he would have to be part of a double pivot where he can just look after one side of the field. Dougie Luiz can look after the other side of the field. But I'm not too sure if Unai Emery has even done that with Kamara and Luiz so far. So I wouldn't be a fan of that. Now, if he did stay out on the side and you brought then Donker in, that's obviously that kind of cures what ails you for me. But Jacob Ramsey may be the guy who might lose out, I suppose. If, like you mentioned about Buendia staying in the team, I think Buendia would stay in the team, and maybe he moves to the left-hand side if Leon Bailey is to play up top, or maybe John Duran. So I think that's probably, there's outside chances of that happening. But I think for me, like you said, Paddy, I think he goes with that tight midfield. Ramsey, McGinn, either side of Dundonker, Luis. We're a bit more conservative. And if you can get a bit more conservative under Unai Emery, but we'll be a bit more away from home. That is, we'll be a bit more conservative, and we'll play Ollie Watkins and Buendia up top. I think that's
there's one thing we haven't mentioned, which seems to have a home and away left fullback as well.
I was that was going to be my next question. Yeah. Do you think it'll be? Who do you think will play left back?
Well, he started Moreno, didn't he, against Everton, and then he went back to his home fullback, which was Luca Dean last weekend. So who knows? Who knows? He's a great philosopher. We just gotta take his opinion on these things, and we're probably reading in too much into it. It could have been a purely tactical decision, that not a home and away decision. That he's seen who these guys are up against and decided that's my man for that particular battle.
Absolutely. And Paddy, since you've got your thinking hat and your future seeing pattern, as Michael McCarthy Smith has asked, where can I get a hat, Paddy? You can get a hat at fortheloveofpaulmcgrath.com. You can go in there and you can see our shop in there. And if you purchase a hat, I've got a couple of them down here. I'll pop it in the post tomorrow. Michael, so fortheloveofpaulmcgrath.com, you'll be able to find one there. But Paddy, the question that I wanted to ask you there was, where's it gone to? So Miles Morris asked this: who comes onto the bench if Dundonker is not available?
I think I've actually lost track of who we have and who's gone out on loan.
Play 7 subs. That's really we're gonna have.
Well, he's only going to realistically bring on 5 anyway, at the most. So I must apologise, because somebody sent me a message the other day on Twitter or Instagram and asked us to do a loan roundup, and I completely forgot about it. But we must have a dig in and see how people are getting on over the next week or so, and see what we can come up with.
I'm off work for 2 weeks, so if you
man,
have just given me something to do. You've just given me something to do for it. It saves me having to dig into the scouting roundup stuff. For sure. But who comes onto the bench? You'd have to think it would be Arjen Reiki.
I would think so, yeah. That's what was in the back of my head. I was thinking, he's not gone out on loan, is he? He played for the under-23s a couple of weeks ago. So yeah, that would be the obvious choice. Some people would say, now that we're more or less safe, is play him if he's that good. You know,
maybe somebody like there could be not a spanner on the works, but you could see somebody like we've seen Sils Finkels on the bench. Maybe he comes in there and Chambers becomes our if Chambers has to step up if the Donker isn't fit. Maybe Finkels gets in there. Maybe Seb Revan gets in there as a. Wait a minute, we don't need more left backs, so probably he doesn't get in there. We don't.
Look, let's be honest. It's going to be Dundonker or Chambers. I think we can put money on that.
I think so, yeah. But who comes onto the bench? I think
the extra one who comes onto the bench. Yeah. But I'd like to see Arjen Reiki in there. I'd like to see the time where we can throw him on and give him some more minutes to show what he can do, because there's a lot of people absolutely raving about him this season. So it would be nice to see what he could do at that level.
There's people talking about recall Wesley, and I know that's probably facetious, so I'd be okay. But if we could recall someone, I think we would be recalling Ireland's greatest ever midfielder, Finadine Azizdan, as he's been called, Finazaz. Would be probably like he seems to be. It's mad, Paddy. I'm seeing people from other teams talking about how good a prospect he is now. I'm seeing people here in Ireland talking about him being in the squad, potentially even starting against Latvia. It looks like we could have a whole new capped midfield against Latvia when it comes up. And long may it continue for Ireland, because we're we need an influx of creativity there in the midfield. No offense to Jeff Hendrick, but I'm not sure I can see Jeff Hendrick play for Ireland. Paddy's laughing because I melt down usually whenever I see him in midfield for Ireland. But Finazaz has been somebody who's been doing really well, and the reason I'm talking about him is because just the guys on loan, I have it here. We've got Lamar Bogard, Aaron Ramsey, who had a fantastic game for Middlesbrough at the weekend. Philip Marshall is at Gateshead. Otherwise, I'm sure he would have been on the bench to make it 3 goalkeepers on the bench. Ben Christine is at Kilmarnock, Finazaz at Plymouth, Louis Barry starting to hit form and hit his stride at Salford. And I completely forgot this guy was even still at the club, but he's at Crawley Town as well. Caleb Chukwuemeka is there at Crawley Town as well.
He won't be there for long.
Well, five games he's played on loan as well. And Tim obviously is out on loan as well. Tim Iragbunum. Yeah, actually, that's interesting. He's not even listed here. Oh, he's
injured.
He is.
Oh.
Well, no, he is listed here. It was just I was looking at the academy players that were out on loan. Jaden Fidajin-Bidet, it's like it's going to be an interesting podcast when we do the guys out on loan, because a lot of these guys, we're looking at them and we're going, they're having good seasons out on loan. They're getting great experience. A lot of them are going to be flogged.
Oh yeah, we can't keep them. We can't keep them all. And with a lot of those names that you've mentioned, the end of this season is time to shit or get off to the pot with them. It's a big decision that needs to be made, and we're probably only going to see realistically. And you didn't even mention Cameron Archer there. We're only going to realistically see 2 or 3 of those still with the club come 1st of September this year. So there's a big decision, because we've a lot of household names with Villa fans out on loan, but we won't have anywhere to put them realistically. So maybe that's a show for the future. Who stays and who goes from that list? That would be interesting.
Yeah, I'm filling up my week next week now, Paddy. You're filling up my week. We're beginning to ramble a small little bit after a half an hour, Paddy, and I know that you don't like doing predictions in the pre-match. I'm reluctant to do them because we're so far out from the game so far at the moment. But I'm going to go with Aston Villa 1, West Ham 0. I just think that every game that we go into, bar against the likes of Man City or Arsenal, I think that Aston Villa can win 1-0. It's just something that I feel under Unai Emery, and I think we will go to be very stout and resolute against this team. Then Donker coming in might give us that bit of an edge with set pieces, as we spoke about previously. Might give us a bit of an edge about maybe trying to outmuscle the likes of Souček if he is playing in that 10 role, which he has been for the last 2 to 3 games, with Paqueta going back to play and be a bit more mobile in around Declan Rice. I think that gives us that little edge. But I would... I'd be going with a 1-0 win Aston Villa. And for another reason, as I say, West Ham have failed to score in 11 other games this season. So, if they don't score, they're going to need to score, should I say, to win. And Matt, thank you so much. I forgot about that. That was at the very, very, very top. You make a very good point there. West Ham 2.2 goals per game versus Aston Villa's 1.2 goals per game. I suppose the context behind that is that West Ham have scored in spurts in some games, which is upped their
is that statistics or is that XG?
I don't know. Maybe it could be XG. I'm not sure.
He might tell us in the comments.
Might be able to tell us in the comments. Yeah.
He might tell us if it's the Loch Ness Monster or not.
What's the Loch Ness Monster? XG.
XG.
Well, I won't be doing a podcast on XG. I did one before. You can go back and find it here on the YouTube channel before about how XG is. It's predicting the future based on history, which is fine, which is absolutely fine. But humans are gooey, and humans can do extraordinary things. Actuals from SofaScore. Oh, cool. Excellent. I haven't done that. As I say, I just counted up how many times that they'd failed to score this season, and Aston Villa versus West Ham at the weekend. I'm glad I checked it before. I for whatever reason I thought it was a Saturday game. It's Sunday at 2:00, obviously, because West Ham play away at in Larnaca in Cyprus. At tomorrow night. I'm sure we'll probably all be glued to it if we can find it on whatever channel, just to see what team they put out. But
nice and early, 5:45 kickoff tomorrow evening. It just baffles me every week that what's really playing on my mind this week, you haven't even encountered it in your head yet, and that's the Aston Villa kickoff at 2:00, and there's a very important rugby match starting at 2:30, and that hasn't even triggered with you yet.
And that's 3:00.
For 3:00, still clashing.
Well, yeah, I was going to offer to go to. I was going to do a very selfless thing and offer to go to the pub to watch that. But maybe I might.
Well, I was going to do the same, and then I realised actually there's zero chance of Aston Villa's game being on the telly if if Ireland are playing Scotland at rugby. But anyway, there you go.
Exactly.
All our English listeners are just turning off as we listen.
Scottish listeners are turning on their droves, though. And that's the other side of it. But I've got 3 screens here, so I'll surely be able to sort out rugby and football and on Sunday. So never fear, we'll still watch the game. We'll still be back with a team sheet tantrum on Sunday, and we'll also be back with a post match on Sunday as well. So if you're at a loose end, come join us. We'd be delighted to have you. We're getting ever so close to 5,000 subscribers on YouTube. Feels like we've been looking to get to 5,000 forever. But I think we got to 4,000, like 4,800 before Christmas, and then it's been a trickle since then. So as I say, if you know of anybody who likes the podcast or may like the podcast, rob their phone, subscribe them on the audio side of things and on the YouTube side of things, and just make two Villa fans over here in Ireland very, very happy. But until then, until the weekend, guys, everybody enjoy the rest of your week. Hope you stay safe. Hope you stay healthy. Here's to an Aston Villa at the weekend. We will be back for a team sheet tantrum, and all that's left to say is up the Villa.
Up the Villa.